We don't need cars from Canada. We don't need energy from Canada. We don't need anything from Canada.
And as I've said on this show many times, that a tariff on Canada is a tax on the American people.
They need our energy. We have energy. They need our critical minerals. We have our critical minerals. If he wants to destroy our auto sector and destroy our steel sector, and for Quebec, the aluminum sector, there won't be a grain of critical minerals going south of the border.
Hey, welcome to my channel. Something's happening up north, and it's not just another trade dispute. It's a quiet shift that could rewrite how power, quite literally, flows across North America. When Ontario Premier Doug Ford declared, "A tariff on Canada is nothing more than a tax on Americans," it sounded like political posturing. But days later, he turned that warning into action. Ontario imposed a 25% surcharge on electricity exports to the U.S., a move that instantly rattled border states like Michigan and New York, which depend heavily on Canadian energy. Overnight, the math changed. U.S. utilities faced an extra $400,000 in daily import costs, and analysts warned the average American household could see electricity bills rise by around $100 a month if the standoff continued. It wasn't just about money, it was about control. For decades, America held the louder megaphone in trade disputes. But now, Canada had found its own amplifier, not through speeches, but through switches, grids, and minerals that keep the U.S. economy running. Behind closed doors, Ottawa officials reportedly discussed contingency plans, even the possibility of cutting power entirely if Washington escalated tariffs further. So here's the real question. Was this just a warning shot? Or the start of a new era where Canada stops playing defense and starts using its economic leverage to fight back? Before we dive in, hit that like button if this already feels eye-opening. It really helps us beat the algorithm. If the electricity surcharge was the spark, Ontario's next move turned it into a strategy. After testing America's reliance on Canadian energy, Doug Ford's government shifted focus to the flow of public money itself. Under the banner Ontario First, rhetoric became regulation. The Building Ontario Businesses Initiative Act, BOBIA, required hospitals, schools, and public agencies to prioritize Ontario-based suppliers for contracts under CA $121,200, ensuring that local workers benefited first. Then came the bigger step, the Procurement Restriction Policy, effective March 4, 2025, which barred U.S. companies without a Canadian headquarters, or at least 250 local employees from bidding on public projects. Overnight, billions in contracts flowed back into the domestic economy. Ontario's public sector spends about CA $30 billion annually, with more than CA $200 billion in infrastructure plans over the next decade. That's not just procurement, it's economic gravity. And for many U.S. suppliers, the door quietly closed. What started as a defensive policy is now being studied across Canada, a potential blueprint for provinces seeking insulation from future trade shocks. If you've made it this far, you probably care. Consider subscribing to stay updated. While tariffs and procurement laws drew headlines, another form of leverage was hiding in plain sight, beneath Canada's soil. From the nickel mines of Sudbury to the vast potash fields of Saskatchewan, Canada holds the raw materials that keep the U.S. economy alive. It's not rhetoric, it's arithmetic. In 2023, the United States imported nearly $47 billion worth of minerals from Canada, making it America's largest single supplier. Roughly 1/4 of all uranium used in U.S. nuclear power plants came from Canadian mines, a direct line into America's energy security. Disrupt that flow, and parts of the U.S. grid could go dark. Nickel tells a similar story. About half of America's nickel supply originates in Canada, feeding everything from aerospace alloys to electric vehicle batteries. And deep in the Yukon and Northwest Territories, the Mactung project, one of the world's richest tungsten deposits, is being revived, while Canada's niobium production quietly reinforces the high-strength steels used in U.S. defense and construction. Then there's potash. Saskatchewan alone provides the fertilizers that underpin American agriculture. As one analyst put it, no potash, no crops. It's an uncomfortable truth, one that exposes how tightly North America's prosperity is wired together, even when politics pull it apart. So, as Washington raises tariffs, How far could Ottawa go before minerals stop being just commodities and start becoming negotiating chips? And the deeper you look, the clearer it becomes. Minerals are just one layer of a much larger web. The real leverage lies in scale. Canada isn't simply a supplier. It's an indispensable part of the machinery that keeps America's factories running. Across North America, supply chains are stitched so tightly that a single disruption can echo from the mines of Sudbury to the assembly lines of Michigan. In 2024, total two-way trade between Canada and the U.S. reached about $909 billion, a figure that speaks less to rivalry than to interdependence. As some analysts like to say, when Ottawa sneezes, Washington catches a cold. That interdependence extends beyond economics into politics. Canada is the #1 export destination for 34 U.S. states, directly tied to local jobs and tax revenues. A pause in Canadian demand can ripple through state economies, hitting budgets and employment long before it reaches Washington's radar. Even within manufacturing, the links are almost biological. Auto components, for example, can cross the border up to 8 times before a single car is fully assembled. One misplaced tariff or customs delay doesn't just raise prices, it compounds them, creating what some industry experts call a tax-on-tax effect. In a system this integrated, Canada doesn't need confrontation to make its point. The structure itself, the vast web of mutual dependency, is the leverage. But Ottawa isn't waiting for Washington to blink first. While trade tensions dominate headlines, Canada has been quietly redrawing its economic map, shifting from reliance on the U.S. toward a more diversified network across Europe, the U.K., and Asia. What once looked like a defensive move now resembles a calculated realignment. Between May 2024 and May 2025, Canada's export share to the U.S. fell by 10 percentage points, settling around 68%, the lowest in over a decade. At the same time, exports to the rest of the world surged by about 42%, or roughly $5.7 billion, helping offset the slowdown in American demand. The United Kingdom has now surpassed China to become Canada's second-largest export market, fueled by a remarkable 473% jump in gold shipments within just a few months. And with the Trans Mountain Pipeline officially operational since May 2024, Canadian oil finally has a direct route to the Pacific, opening access to markets in Japan, South Korea, and India, no longer dependent on U.S. ports or pricing systems. This pivot isn't ideological, it's practical. By prioritizing exports like gold, oil, uranium, and pharmaceuticals, Canada is focusing on goods that are both high in value and difficult to block with tariffs. In other words, it's building flexibility into its trade model, a safety valve against future shocks. The message behind this shift is subtle but unmistakable. Canada isn't cutting ties with the U.S., but it's making sure those ties are no longer the only lifeline. If diversification is the short-term buffer, regulation is the long game. Ottawa is no longer just reacting to tariffs, it's quietly redesigning the mechanics of interdependence. What began as defense is now statecraft. Instead of matching Washington tariff for tariff, Canada is building a broader toolkit: sanctions, export controls, investment screening, and selective tariffs, not to raise prices, but to reshape exposure. Each tool works like a circuit breaker, able to slow or cut critical flows when needed. The Investment Canada Act, updated in March 2025, expanded Ottawa's authority to block or review foreign takeovers deemed opportunistic, especially in technology and infrastructure. The goal isn't isolation, it's insulation. Canada wants openness with allies, but protection from volatility or pressure. At the provincial level, Ontario followed the same logic: a review of procurement rules to prioritize Ontario-made goods while diversifying trade with 51 tariff-free partners from South Korea to the EU. Even defense policy reflects this shift. Ottawa's review of the F-35 program quietly questioned long-term reliance on U.S. systems, not to challenge Washington, but to assert independence within the alliance. Together, these moves signal a deeper ambition: to build resilience through control, not confrontation. Every turning point demands a choice, and for Canada, that choice may come through the USMCA review window. Hidden in the agreement is an opening to redefine how North America manages its most strategic assets: energy, minerals, and technology. Ottawa has proposed adding a critical minerals chapter to coordinate pricing and streamline mine permitting. Officially, it's cooperation. In practice, It lets Canada shape the rules for a system where it controls key inputs, cobalt, nickel, and lithium. Meanwhile, Ottawa is investing $500 million over 5 years in 5G and AI innovation centers, leveraging roughly 10% of the world's AI patents to modernize trade and logistics. The long-term aim is to shift resource supply lines toward Europe and India, insulating Canada from Washington's political cycles. The question now isn't whether Canada can diversify, it's whether it's ready to rewrite the rules that once defined its dependency. As tariff walls rise again, one dilemma remains. Should Canada keep playing by the old North American order or draft its own playbook, built on balance, resilience, and choice? So, what do you think? Should Canada stay aligned under Washington's rules or chart a new course that puts its interests first? If this video gave you something to think about, like and subscribe to support more content like this. Thank you.